everybody, and welcome back to another week of the Proud to Work in Cannabis podcast. Happy Wednesday, happy hump day. I'm very excited to have Socrates with me today. We've been talking about doing this episode. Gosh, Soc, we've been talking about it for what feels like a year, but Soc Rosenfeld is one of the 5 co-founders, and Soc is the CEO of Jane Technologies. So, Soc, thanks for coming on today. How's it going?
Thank you so much, Carson. I love the show, and it's an honor to be on with you today. So thanks for having me on.
Where are you calling in from? I forget where you're based.
Based in Santa Cruz, California, Surf City, USA. So yeah, that's where I'm based. Love it.
And is most of the team there? Is most of the team remote? How are you guys navigating in person versus remote?
Yeah, we're largely a remote company. I would say maybe between 10 and 20% are in the Bay Area, and then everywhere else is scattered across mostly North America. We have one shout out down there in Argentina, but that's about it.
Well, I want to get into that, but first, I really want to hear about your experience at West Point. So I don't think we've never had anybody on the show that went to the United States Military Academy, West Point. So how did you decide that was the path that you wanted to go down?
Wow. Yeah. I don't think I decided it for myself. I think I had other people decide it for me because at the age of 18, I don't know about you, but I wasn't even aware of myself really. I was kind of just doing what people were telling me to do. You know, a lot of people were telling me if you have a chance to go to West Point, you go. I didn't have my parents sat me down pretty early on and were like, hey, you got to go figure out this college thing on your own. So I felt like it was a great education. I could do something that not a lot of people were going to do. It was going to challenge me. And I decided to go, and I really wasn't ready to go. I was homesick. I didn't understand like authority and how to handle that. So for those that were my close friends at school, and there's not a lot of them, but there were a few, they knew that I barely made it through that school, despite myself. But I am so grateful that I was able to attend because it taught me really what friendship really was. And it taught me a lot about my character and who I was. And not to say that I handled everything exactly how I thought I should be handling it, because I didn't. But looking back, I was put in situations that, you know, maybe normal 18, 19-year-old kids never put themselves in. And I'm grateful I was able to thankfully make it on the other side because of some really close friends who helped me get there, and some great mentors that, despite myself, saw the best in me and helped me get to the other side. So I'm not the best representative for that school, and they'll tell you that, but I'm really grateful and honored to have walked those halls.
Actually, my boyfriend from high school went to the Naval Academy, and so I went down and visited.
Not the same, Carl.
It's not the same.
I'm joking.
But I went down and visited, and I went to St. Lawrence in upstate New York, and it was a very different experience. You know, I think when he came to visit me at St. Lawrence and I would go down and visit there, it was like wildly different. Is the first year the hardest at West Point too?
First year's pretty tough. You know, I think the cool part about, there's a lot of stuff I don't enjoy about the military. And you asked me to be authentic, so I'm going to be authentic on this.
Please.
So the cool stuff is that you can't have an ego at that school. You know, they take all these seemingly like well accomplished 18-year-old kids, or as accomplished as you can be at the age of 18. You know, good at sports, good at education, etc. They strip you down from all of that, strip that all away from you. You know, to the point where you don't have a first name. They shave your head. You don't have a look. You're just you're a number really, and that's pretty heavy to go through, but it's in some crazy weird way. Like people are trying to do that with ayahuasca right now, right? And mushrooms, and like they want the ego death. Well, you can go join the army and they'll do that. The issue I take with the military is they build you up in how they want you to be built up. They don't let you build yourself really. So I got the experience of kind of letting go of the ego, which was really challenging. And usually that happens in the first year, where to the point where like you're not allowed to talk outside of your room. You can't eat a lot. You have to do a lot of like weird tasks, and some traditions there. You got to memorize things, and upperclassmen can yell at you. But really, it was about that. I mean, that stuff is manageable. But for me, the most profound, like, intense thing for me was like, well, I'm not Socrates anymore from Newton South High School, and who am I then? And it's funny that I went through that exact same experience, Carson, when I got out of the military 12, 13 years later. I didn't realize who I was. And I think a lot of military veterans experience that, where the Army tells you who you are. They literally tell you, like, this is your rank, these are your accomplishments, this is your responsibility, this is what you're allowed to do, not allowed to do, say or can't say. This is how you walk, this is how you talk, this is how you dress, which is interesting, but you leave and then you really don't know who you are all over again. And so, and I'm sure we'll get to it, but that's what cannabis allowed me to do, is connect with my true self. And a lot of medicines let me do that. Yeah.
Let's go there. So you were in the military from, I think, 2004 to 2011. You were a pilot. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was. I flew Apache helicopters. I was a pilot there, and then commanded a company, and was a platoon leader. So yeah, I did that for a while.
Long time. And where all did you go in the world?
All over. I was in the Middle East. I was in Asia. I was stateside. So yeah, 7 years jam-packed. Got to see all different places of the world. Got to work with all different kinds of people, and that's a really cool thing. And you realize, like, to be able to do that, I was a platoon leader in charge of 4 Apache helicopters at the age of 24 in Korea, just flying around. And now the thought of doing that is insane to me. But the Army had some trust, or at least they had no other option but to go with me at that point.
So you get out in 2011, and how did you think about what you were going to do with your career, to your point around rediscovering yourself?
Yeah, I did the exact same thing I did when I was 18. I asked other people what they think I should do, which is sad, right? At the age of 30, been to Iraq, commanded a company, did all this stuff, and I get out and I had no idea what to do. And I know there's a lot of military veterans probably who have felt the same way. I think a lot of people feel the same way sometimes. And, you ask people, and that's wonderful, and they can give you advice, but if you don't have conviction for yourself, you kind of fall back into the same pattern. That's what I did, this pattern of just defaulting to accomplish things, to gain approval and love from people. And so they said, oh, you should go to business school. And thankfully I listened this time, because it was less so about the business degree and more so about just 2 years where I could come back to myself. And that was the first time, Carson, that I had consumed cannabis, and it changed my life, because here I had something that was actually connecting me to myself and bringing me back to my heart. And I knew deep down that this was something that was like I was meant to be with this plant. It really felt that way. And I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew that I loved it and I had a passion for the plant, and started reading about the industry, and I bought Steve D'Angelo's book, the Cannabis Manifesto, and geeked out over that and started to understand the biology around it. And I graduated from business school, and that's a 2-year experience. And still I was asking people what I should do. And they said, oh man, you should go and consult for this, consulting firm. I said, okay, yeah, I guess that's what's going to get me approval and love in this world, and then I'll be happy. And so I did that, and the same thing.
So you went to McKinsey, is that correct?
Yeah, went to McKinsey, which I tend to go into these institutions that I have no business getting into, and I just somehow kind of sneak in. Really, there's a great quote during the interview process where they said, man, Sock, we really like you, but we're not convinced that you can do math. And they were right. I can't. So I was at McKinsey, and I was, studying e-commerce, and I remember I was in a meeting with the CEO of this company. And I remember looking at the CEO and being like, what does that guy know that I don't know? Or I went all to the same schools. I did all this stuff. Like, why can't I do that? And I quickly realized, like, all these CEOs are just human beings, right? Like you and I are just human beings. And I was like, well, I'm a human being. I'm really passionate about this. I think there's a problem I can solve. That's when I started to really fall in love with the idea of Jane. And that's when my life really changed. It was the first time I think I pursued something just following my heart rather than following anything else. And that really changed my life.
And so just to bring everyone up to speed, like timeline wise, this is like winter of 2016 where you were getting ready to launch Jane. Is that about the right timeline?
This was like, my friends at McKinsey will probably know, like probably the first week I got to the firm, I knew I this was not right for me. And I apologize to any colleague that worked with me during that time because they probably picked up on that. And then maybe 6 months into my gig at McKinsey, I had the idea, and that's when I worked like nights and mornings on it and weekends, and then quit in 2016 and went full time. And we didn't launch. I thought we were going to launch the product in the spring of 2016. We didn't launch the product until spring of 2017. So that was my first wake up call that things take longer than you think.
And you mentioned that you're one of 5 co-founders. Can you tell us about the other 4? How you met them, who they are?
Oh man, yeah. No one ever asked me this, so I appreciate it because I love them. I really love them. The first is my brother Abe, who's the CTO. He has 2 computer science degrees from MIT. The dude is a genius. I hesitate to say that because he's going to get a bigger head than he already has, but a true problem solver. And my brother, and he could probably have worked anywhere, but he was the real kind of genius around data cleansing, et cetera. There's Ben Green, who's a family friend of ours, grew up in Newton, Mass. First generation families from South Africa. He was a landscape architect who knew how to design, and he actually gave me my first cannabis ever, like really like a true brother to me. And maybe for another call, Carson, I can tell you about my first time consuming. I mean, he was just a really just generous, loving person, and he was actually the first one crazy enough to come join me in Santa Cruz. He now is on the partner success team. So if you're on the West Coast at a dispensary, you probably have come across Ben. Then you have Howard. He's from Australia. I met him at business school. Howard Hong, one of the most brilliant business minds. Truly, like in the best ways, a crazy human being, but just in a wonderful way. Has just an appetite for life and a taste for life that inspires me and motivates me every day. He's our COO/CFO, and then you have Simon Roddy, who's Howard's friend from university out in Sydney, Australia. Also went to business school. He was at McKinsey. Just an absolute gem of a human being, and can make anybody feel comfortable in no matter what situation. So he's our CRO, and I'm. To say that I'm grateful to those folks would be an understatement. The love I have for them is really, it's almost undescribable. But I just respect and I'm so grateful for them.
So did you just call them and say, "Hey, I've got this idea for a cannabis company. What do you think?" Or how did you get this band together?
Yeah. Okay, that's I love this. It's already a good podcast. Because you're a founder, you know it. So I call my bro. The 2 people I used to have business ideas, Carson, as I'm sure your mind, that's the way it works. And I'd have all these ideas, and first was my wife, Emily, and my second was my brother, Abe. And they would always, I called them like kind of the dream crushers, because they would always just be like, no, it's a bad idea. This won't work, that won't work. And I'd be like, damn. And then I had this idea about Jane, and I told my wife, and she was like, it's actually a decent idea. Which, like, if you hear that from Emily, you're like, oh my God, okay, this is good. And then I called Abe, and his first reaction, he just said, shit. And I was like, oh, it's a bad idea. He's like, no, it's actually a really good idea. And I know by me telling you this is a good idea, you're going to go off, raise some money, and try to get me to join. And at the time, he was at another startup, Loving Life. So his immediate reaction was like, oh shit. Ben was crazy. He like was in between jobs, traveling. He was traveling the world on like no money. And I asked him one email. I was like, hey man, I'm doing this. You want to do this? He's like, yeah, I'm in. And so he's just crazy enough to join. And then Howard and Simon both joined. I didn't even ask them. They caught wind that I was starting this, and I'll never forget. Howard drove from San Francisco to my house in Santa Cruz, and he's like, "Yeah, when can I start?" And I was like, "Well, I'm not. We don't need anybody else." He's like, "Cool, man. I'll just work for free, and I'll bring my mate Simon along, who I didn't know at the time." I was like, "Cool. I'm going to get free help from these guys," and I'm so grateful that I did. We're just kind of paying them now. I'm joking, but yeah, that's how it started. It didn't take probably the person who needed the most convincing was Abe,
Your brother.
my brother. Yeah, because he was in a good spot in life, and I would argue that he's probably in a better spot now. He would tell you that too.
So between 2016, when you went into it full time, and 2017, when the product launched, did you raise money before you launched a product? Did you launch a light version of a product? Like, talk to me about that first year, because there's so many people out there who, what you just described, have the idea, like we had, and they really want to hear about, like, what do you actually do from the time that you get 5 guys, brother, family, friends, to the a product in the market.
I had no idea what I was doing. I still don't know. Which I kind of like, because, you make a lot of mistakes, but you do things that, on paper you think are impossible, but ignorance is bliss. So I remember I called our first investor. He was a classmate of mine from business school, and I pitched him the business, and I will never forget. It was a small amount. I won't disclose how much, but I remember asking how much it was. It was not a lot of money. And I remember asking him for that much, because I thought, there's no way he would give me this much money. It was low 6 figures, I'll say. And I remember he said yes. And I, of course, like every founder, give away way too much equity at the beginning. And so I had a little bit of money. And the first question he asked me was, when are you going to quit McKinsey? And that was like, oh, wow, this is getting real. And so I quit. I didn't pay myself. Ben joined me. He didn't pay himself. And so we were kind of working on this thing together. Abe was part-time because he had another startup. Howard and Simon actually weren't really in the mix at that point. So we were just building. We had an offshore dev. I think I Googled like cheapest offshore development firm on Google, which is like the wrong thing to search for. And found an offshore dev. They were really sweet people, but not the best engineers. We spent about a year waking up at 4:30 in the morning, because they were in Russia at the time, and we were doing remote and trying to put this thing together. There was like no test code. There was no like design system. It was just gnarly. And I remember thinking we were going to launch in January of 2017. We were working on this thing for a year. Somebody told me to like, hey, if you're working for an offshore dev, you might want to just get an onshore dev just to look at this thing and make sure it's up to snuff. And so we brought in another dev firm to take another look at this thing. They were expensive, and they looked at it, and I'll never forget. They told me, they were like, you're going to have to rebuild the whole thing, man. This is bad. The whole front end is like, it's not usable. And it was like, it was just heart wrenching. And so we sunk the rest of our money into this thing. I had like $30,000 left when we launched, and then quickly, once we launched, started to raise the Series A. And the Series A took me about a year to raise through small checks, and that was the journey, just kind of like piecing this thing together.
I should have probably done this earlier, but for people listening who may not know, Jane, what was we can talk about what the product is today, but the original pitch, when you called up your business school friend and asked for the first check, what was the pitch and what was the problem you were solving right away?
Can you make shopping online for cannabis as simple as shopping online for anything else in this world? At the time, I was doing a lot of studies on aggregators like DoorDash and Uber Eats and Postmates and 1-800-Flowers, and was like, man, this at the time I thought it was like a marketplace play, and that's obviously evolved for the 8 years that we've been building this thing. But at its core, I think it's the same as can you help people order online for cannabis, and can you support the businesses that are selling offline products? Can you help them sell online as well? And that's been the thesis really since day one.
And so you get the product out, then you start piecing together the Series A, which takes about a year and a half. Once you got that completed, what were the critical things that you did after Series A? So this is like 2018, 2019-ish?
2018, 2019, you hire your next band of generation of crazy people to join you. At the time, we did the first year plus was really like 6 people. I want to shout out Ezra, our employee number 1, who's a college student at UCSC at the time, who joined us just to do whatever. He's still with us too. So thank you, Easy. We hired Brian Geddes, who's now our VP of Sales. We hired Al Rosenfeld, who's now our SVP of Partner Success. We hired Tim Zielinski, who's our Director of Business Development.
Wow, that's really impressive that all of these folks are here 6 years later.
Oh yeah, that's the average tenure of a director or above at the company is 40 months.
Wow.
At the company, so long tenure. Very rarely do we hire an outside leader to come in. We have a saying here where we grow our own. I learned that from the military. I learned that from McKinsey as well. You don't hire outside leaders. You kind of marinate them in the sauce, and you have a program that can grow and scale them. And that's honestly been why the culture at Jane is what it is because of our leadership. And I am so grateful to every single leader at the company because they are really bought into the Jane way. They understand what we're trying to do, why we're trying to do it, and how we do it. And I don't think you can get that by bringing someone in from fill in the blank outside company. You get that by growing our own. And
we've made that mistake, and it's like a culture killer. I think about Vangston for the first, until we raised the Series A, we just only really promoted from within, and we had almost no turnover.
Yeah.
And then, I would say between Series A and especially after Series B, and you know it more than anyone, you get the pressure from your board and your investors to, in our case, go hire the VP of sales from Indeed, which
right.
So you spend 6 months finding the person and then bring them in, and then they bring in a slew of their own people, and then the original people are pissed and the new people are also pissed, and then all of a sudden you're sitting there and you're like, wow, now nothing is working. So I wish I would have listened to this podcast before I made the colossal mistake. But for company number 2, I definitely know. But I think that that is cool about back to things that you've learned from the military of growing from within, grow your own way. I think that's a lesson that it's so hard to learn the way that I learned. So I wish I would have just, called you.
Yeah, right. I still interview every single candidate that comes through, on the final. And by the time they interview me, it's pretty much a shoo-in. But what I'm checking are 2 things. One is okay, who is this human being that's coming into the organization? Less so salesperson, engineer. But really what I'm doing is I'm checking in on my hirers to make sure that we are hiring the right kinds of people, not the best people, but the right people. And that's a really good QC process for us because we don't really make any – we make some mistakes, obviously, but I would say 95% of the time we don't make a mistake on the kind of human being that comes into the organization. And where I've made mistakes, Carson, is I listen to, my favorite are the investors that are like, oh, this worked in this company. It's going to work here. So this is what you need at this stage. And that's really like a parent telling another parent, oh, your kid's 2. You really need to get your kid doing this. But really, the mother or the father knows that better than anyone. It's great to get advice, but ultimately, you're going to do what's right for your child. And Jane's kind of my child, along with the co-founders. And quite frankly, along with the leadership now, it's theirs as much as it is mine. Yeah, we were just really lucky to have put in the process now, because now it's just – we don't look for an outside executive. I think we've hired 2 outside executives for the past 6-7 years, and we've just grown the rest.
So you do that. You get to the Series A. Then talk to us about, because you've raised you've probably raised close to you've raised quite a bit of capital. Definitely one of the companies that have raised the most in the space. So then, what happened after the Series A in terms of your capital journey?
We raised the Series B. Pretty straightforward. Same deal. Raised 20 million, 21 million. and that was in 2019. And I'll never forget, we were good, and then COVID happens, and like things go nuts, really crazy for all of us. I think LeafLink at the time had raised a lot of money, like 80 million or something, they had around, or 40 million or something like that. And then we open up the laptop one day, and I read that Dutchy raised 200 million. I was like, wow, is this even possible in this space? It was like, I wasn't even thinking about that. So I have some thoughts on that of like, was the industry ready? Were tech companies ready? I don't think so, in my opinion. So it created a massive imbalance in the space. I'm not calling Dutchy out or anybody. But at the same time, too, what it did was it opened our eyes and stretched us as to what is possible, which I'm grateful for. And we, being Dutchy's kind of main competitor, decided to raise at a similar time. It was able to raise 100 million off that. And man, like you study these business use cases and things like that, and it's just you kind of are in the right time at the right position, and we raised it, and I'm so grateful we did at the time. So it's a blessing and a curse. Like, was the industry ready to have tech companies raising hundreds of millions of dollars? I would argue if they were good stewards of it, maybe. But at the same time, was it great that we were able to stretch ourselves and think like, hey, there's some real capital here. This is not like a kind of cottage industry that you have to convince your uncle to invest in. These are real players moving into this space, and I'm grateful that we had some tech players in here, you included, at Vanks, raising some good capital for some great investors. Like that, I thought that was really, really positive for the industry. It's a matter of now, can we execute on that? But that's not an issue just for the cannabis tech. It's tech in general.
So was that the $100 million round? Was that the last round that you've done?
Last round. Yep. Last round. We're not raising anymore.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. I mean, I feel like, to your point around just like you got to do things when the timing is right, it was almost foolish for us, banks included, not to raise money during 2021, 2020. But now it seems like not the ideal time for any tech company in or outside of cannabis. And so how have you changed your mentality from focusing on growth to focusing on profitability, making the capital last? I do feel sometimes when I talk to people, it was a little bit like whiplash. It was like grow as fast as you can and raise another round in 18 months to like, okay, be profitable and grow sustainably.
Yeah. I mean, calling a spade, like that's Dutchy setting the pace. They were the leaders in fundraising, very aggressive, very fast. They joined up and partnered up with Tiger Global, who is notorious for really throwing out any kind of business fundamentals and just throwing as much. I remember sitting with the investor at Tiger Global, and this is a very candid conversation. So hopefully this
no, we're all about we want the candidness.
This is what you wanted. And I remember talking to the investor who represented Tiger Global, was the portfolio manager there, who's about to invest in Dutchy. And it was just, I asked him why he didn't do it in his due diligence. Why didn't he talk to us at Jane? I thought that was weird. Because the investors that wanted to invest in Jane definitely did their due diligence and talked to our competitors to make sure that they were betting on the right horse. And I remember he said something that was very interesting to me. He's like, we don't do due diligence here. We talk to a founder, and if we like the founder, we're going to give that founder more money than he could ever dream of, and they're going to win. And that was a real conversation. And I remember thinking to myself, man, that seems like an interesting approach. And so it was, and you saw Dutchy raise again, right? After the 200, they raised, I think, like 350 million more from other Tiger Global investors. And that was their play. And that was everybody's play. It's like, it's not a bad thing. It was just how everybody was getting rewarded was how fast you could go. Like, can you grow 100% year over year over year over year and get more and more and more investment and basically starve out your competitors and then figure out monetization from there. You saw it with DoorDash try to play that game, right? Even Uber tried to play that game. And Dara got unprofitable, but Snapchat, right? Another one. It's like they will never be profitable. So those days of can you build a company for speed are over, and now it's about resiliency. Now it's about endurance. Now it's about profitability. And so for us, to be honest with you, we have always been built for endurance. It took a lot for us to like say, screw the fundamentals, go fast, grow, 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 grow. Who cares about your customers? Just keep growing, keep growing. And that never felt natural. I'm a big hippie now, Carson. I like walk in the woods a lot. And if you look at nature, like things go slowly. Nothing happens overnight. And things don't grow 100% year over year over year over year forever in perpetuity. And so this is why the tech industry is where it's at today, is because we created something that's not natural. And in order to have a natural growth, you have to be able to power your own growth. And so we always have been building with fundamentals. That's why we're only about 200 employees when our competitors were up to like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 800 employees. So I think, have we had to make an adjustment? Absolutely, because the arena and the kind of construct has changed, and the way companies get rewarded has changed. But I'm glad that for us, the correction, I don't think has been as drastic maybe for some other companies. And I'm grateful for
that. It sounds like you're able to now operate the way that you're more comfortable operating.
Much, much better. Like slowing down the growth, letting, being resourceful with the cost, growing at the pace that your culture and the product can allow for. Like that's natural to me. And for the past really decade, with these big hedge funds coming in and just raising these insane multi-billion-dollar funds, it threw everything out of whack. And I think, as painful as it is to correct, I think the ecosystem will be a lot better for it moving forward.
So you said that you're a big hippie and you're going on walks in the woods now. What as a founder, what are the things that you do, speaking of endurance, to make sure that you have the endurance and you have the stamina to stay on the field for a long time? Because to your point around how it's really hard and unnatural for companies to grow 200%, 200%, 200%. Founders you and I know it, we get stretched like a crazy amount.
Yeah.
So what do you do for yourself to stay on the field?
So I can answer this in kind of 3 parts. Physically, I'm really paying attention to the physical more so than ever. If you knew me in the Army, if you know anyone in the Army, you really don't take care of your body. You're not taught to do that, which is strange. You should. But like just basic stuff. Are you hydrated? Do you go to sleep? Can you move your body and feel good in it? Like just normal things. I'm 41 now, so it really is true. When you hit 40, you're like, damn, I'm old, or I'm starting to feel old. So that's
I don't think so. I was just talking to someone about how I can't wait for I feel like 40s are like the decade. People really thrive in their 40s.
Oh, I'm not saying it's bad, but I'm saying I have to stretch more. It gets better. 4th floor is nice, Carson. So I'll see you.
I just turned 30, so I'll see you at the 4th. I'll see you at the 4th floor.
Oh, 30s are amazing. 30s for me were the decade of saying no. So enjoy that.
Let's talk about that in a little bit. But back to so you're making sure that
my body's good. Mentally, I am. I read. I meditate. I try not to. It sounds so old, but I try to be very disciplined with the inputs that go into my brain. As much as I love, Summer House and reality TV sometimes, I really have to pay attention to that because I need to make decisions, like good decisions, and I can't just be kind of numbed out all the time and distracted. And then really the most important is protecting my heart and giving myself a break and realizing that I'm just a human being doing the best I can too, and showing myself grace and empathy and forgiveness and non-judgment. Like all the things you give to your employees, can you give that to yourself? And that has been the hardest, most challenging practice, if I'm being honest, because I wasn't taught to do that. And I'm glad that I'm using this opportunity. As scary as life may be sometimes as an entrepreneur, can you sit with it and just be there for yourself and not go against yourself? something I'm working on. And that's been a wonderful practice, and I'm really grateful for this opportunity to be able to practice that.
I need to practice that. I'll tell you that. I'm taking a lot of notes on this podcast. I want to talk about Cannabis 2023 from where you sit. You see, you work with thousands of businesses in the space. People are, as we said before we started recording, it's gnarly out there. What are you seeing from where you sit in just terms of the overall space?
Yeah, I think people are tired. I think we ran this race thinking there was a finish line. Simon Sinek says it best in one of his books. Where like the game of business, there is no finish line. The game of life, there is no finish line. So, don't sprint past your capabilities. Like, just realize like you need to be built for endurance. So I think a lot of people like thought maybe this was going to be like a get rich quick scheme. Like, hey, we're going to get in, we're going to say we're the so-and-so of cannabis, we're going to ride this, and then we're going to sell this thing when it gets legal and we're out. And we built up a wrong expectation in our collective minds of like, oh, during the midterm, safe banking is going to go, or Biden got elected, this is going to go legal. So I think the fallout from just disappointment after disappointment on the expectations has really made people tired. So for me, I'm just like, cool. I'm running because I want to run. I'm not running to finish a race. I being like collective chain. We, I should say. I think a lot of businesses rode this wave and really had no fundamentals. Absolutely, and that's where you're seeing a lot of the fallout. Retailers who don't care about margins and just care about like growth, brands that don't care about knowing their customer and just kind of want to catch some trend, like really not focus on the fundamentals. Now it's caught up with them, and that's unfortunately we're seeing a lot of the fallout. And unfortunately, and this is direct to your business, you see like this affects human beings' lives. It's not the employee's fault, right? And I'm not saying it's any individual's fault, but there was a lot of like build up. Screw the fundamentals. We're going to sell this thing when it goes legal. Legality doesn't come as soon as we want. And now you're seeing this massive correction. But what gives me hope is the fact that, and I see this with the data, this is factual. There are new customers joining the industry at a rate just like before. People are shopping more so than they have ever before. Yes, price compression is a real thing. Yes, stores are closing, but the demand is there. Like I would be nervous from a business standpoint, and quite frankly, from a citizen of the world standpoint, if all of a sudden people start to get sick with cannabis, or people start to realize like, oh my God, it's extremely addictive, and it's whatever, all the stuff that's not true. That none of that is true. Like that's the real scary shit. The real stuff that's scary now is, oh man, I thought this company is going to be worth X. It's not worth X anymore. Oh my God, the sky is falling. Cannabis isn't hot anymore. And that's just bullshit.
Yeah, I actually think about it. It's like, it's not one of these crazes like NFTs or something where it's not really real. Like there's people purchasing, consuming cannabis every day. It's helping people every single day. It's taking people off of their ridiculous drugs that they shouldn't be on in the first place. And so I'm with you that it's like, it is frustrating. And it's also frustrating. I would actually like your take on this, because it's frustrating to explain to especially investors who are like, I don't get it. There's so many people consuming cannabis. Why is nobody making any money? And I feel like that's like the common question. And it is like, it is a little bit confusing, but so then you try to go down the path of explaining, well, there's this thing called 280E, and there was companies that didn't care about fundamentals, and the space was hot, and now it's not, and we're in this massive correction, but it's going to get better. But people are like, when? So I really liked your line around you're running because you want to run, not because you're trying to finish the race. I think that's the right mentality in this endurance moment.
You got it. Like, go back to, I know you started around the time when you started like 2016, right?
Yeah. May of 2016.
May 2016. Remember those days?
Best times.
And you couldn't talk to a single person who was in this industry for like, it's like, oh man, this cured my Crohn's disease, or I had a mother who died of cancer. It was this, or like, hey, I got out of prison and I want to serve the industry back again. Like that was it. And then money started getting involved, right? And this is the game we play in a capitalistic country that is America. And I defended this country and love it. But this is like anytime money gets involved, you run the risk of losing the why. And the why becomes make money. The why becomes return my investment. The why becomes get on the cover of Forbes, whatever that is. We forget the why. And for us at Jane, the why has always come back to the plant because the plant's the answer. Software is not the answer. Brick and mortar is not the answer. Cool brands aren't the answer. Get the plant in people's hands. The way we know how to best do that is to build a business and provide that access or to hire people to get into the space, right? Like you guys are doing. It was never about, let me build this thing so I can make money. Investors, 99% of investors out there, that's their job is to make money, right? And so that's why they're disappointed. But look at how far we've come as an industry. And I would say none of that's possible without GTI or Vangst or the small cottage, mom and pop shop in Oregon or Jane or Weed Maps or Dutchie. Like we're all involved in shaping this consciously or not consciously. And at Jane, what we try to do is always come back to our why. Why are we building software? Why are we raising more money? Why are we hiring these people? Is to come back to protect the integrity of this plant. And if we come back to that and we fail, okay. If we lose sight of that and we make a ton of money, is that really success? And we don't have a lot of venture capital at Jane. We raised over 130 million, but we haven't had to go to the big Tiger Globes of the world. Number one, because they wouldn't take our call, but number two, the benefit is we had a lot of people who bought into our why, and I'm here because of the why. And I would argue that the employees at Jane are there for the why. We're not certainly paying them enough where they can't go make more money at another company. So maybe this great extinction event in cannabis is needed. Maybe the plant knows, hey, we need to course correct here. And the people who can ride it out and endure are the ones that are going to benefit. But let's not lose our collective why in this industry. And it's kind of sad to me to see kind of in short order how quickly we've abandoned the why. And I don't need a reminder because it helped me. It helps me every day. Oh, one of the things I didn't mention that helps me with being an entrepreneur. Shit, I should have just said, surfing is great. Cannabis is like one of my best friends. Seth Rogen says in his book, The Yearbook, I don't know if you read it, Carson.
I haven't read it, but I will.
It's good. He talks about how the fact that he always has to justify or defend his cannabis consumption. And I thought it was so brilliant the way he structured it in his kind of comedic mind. He said, it was like, well, this is like, no one asked me why I wear suntan or sunscreen. No one asked me why I wear shoes. Like, that's not natural.
Yeah.
But I wear it every day because we burnt a hole in the ozone. And if I don't wear sunscreen, I'm going to get burnt and hurt my skin. So I'm using it every day. Cannabis, we've created a very stressful world. This is very stressful out there. I don't tell anybody. And to be an entrepreneur and a CEO is very stressful. Man, to get a little bit of meditation, to take a moment for yourself and connect back to your heart. And that's what the plant does for you. Fuck, that's the why.
That's the why. Well, this is the perfect ending point. I had some other questions, but your last 5 minutes and bringing it back to the why, I feel like is a great place to wrap. So, Sock, if people want to get in touch with you, potentially want to join the team, be part of the culture, I know that you're not hiring any executives, but maybe they could enter in a lower position and grow from within the culture at Jane. How can the folks get in touch with you or the people who are hiring at Jane?
Reach out to us, info@iheartjane.com. I read every single email on info@. Go to our careers page. We have some postings there. Hit me up on LinkedIn or go through Vangst.
Well, Sock, thank you so much. Well, I'll see you in Vegas this year. What is this, our 9th year in a row?
Yeah, Vegas. I know.
We have to do. I'll organize the dinner again this year, so I hope you can make it.
That'd be pretty cool. Yeah, it's like, hey guys, let's not forget.
Yeah, let's not forget the why. Maybe it would be cool if we at the dinner for people listening, we do a founders dinner we've been doing it like the last 3-4 years. It'd be cool to have everybody share their why and just talk about,
That would be cool.
Bring us back to 2016 till today. So I've got some ideas. Maybe you and I can partner up for the dinner.
Cool. Yeah, let me know.
Well, sounds great. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. Sock, always great to see you, and I'll see everybody soon. Thanks.
Thanks so much. Bye.